Super short intro here, guys. Thank you for clicking on this episode. You guys are in for a good one. You're going to enjoy it. But quick request of you, but it's also a favor to you, because if you want to get better at running, which assuming that you clicked on this episode, you do, every Thursday, we send out a free newsletter, which will give you the tools, the lessons, the stories to improve in your training, your racing, whether you're a coach, a parent, an athlete. This newsletter is perfect for you. Completely free, comes out once a week, every single Thursday. I've left a link in the show notes. It's called The Rundown by The Running Effect, written by today's guest, Alex Ostberg, who has broken 4 minutes in the mile, was an NCAA All-American. He coaches with the legendary Jerry Schumacher and coaches a lot of accomplished Nike pros, who I'm sure many of you guys are aware of. So the guy has so much wisdom. He distills it every week into this newsletter. It's completely free. It's our gift to you, to the sport. We want to make you guys as fast, as happy, as fulfilled as possible. So subscribe to the newsletter. Worst case scenario, you unsubscribe, but looking on the back end, no one really ever unsubscribes. So don't let other people have an advantage over you by subscribing to this newsletter and you not. So go in the show notes, subscribe, and enjoy today's conversation of the podcast with Alex Ostberg. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct privilege of sitting down with the man of the hour, the author, the genius extraordinaire behind The Rundown by The Running Effect, Alex Ostberg. Alex, it's our second time sitting down this year, but first time breaking down the newsletter, as we tend to do every single month. We break down the last 4 editions of The Rundown, so it's kind of an audible version of what you're writing. If you're new to the podcast, if you're new to Alex and this discussion, I highly recommend subscribing to the newsletter. Comes out every Thursday, completely free. Doesn't hurt up to sign up. Alex, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. Today we're going to be talking about 2 of the highest performing pieces in the Rundown's history. So I think the audience is in store for a good episode.
Let me ask you this. Do you have any dot on why you think these ones performed the best?
We might have just nailed the timing with one of them. The one we're going to talk about first is about habits and habit change. And we intentionally released that on January 1st, which probably overlaps with when everyone's choosing their New Year's resolutions. So we might have just kind of hit a gold mine there with when kind of interest intersected with like a good piece of writing. I don't know. But I'll take it. It's been exciting to follow progress.
My theory, if I had to put a pin on it, is I think people are obsessed with other successful people and knowing about their habits. We, by nature, are comparison creatures. And then I think anytime you throw in myth with something that people relate to, so this one was titled The Running Shoe Myth That Won't Die, I think people naturally are like, what are you talking about? Like, what myth are you saying I'm referencing?
Right.
And I loved we can just honestly hop in, the 8 underrated habits that changed my life. Obviously, you've lived a successful life, but I also feel like you've worn many different hats throughout your life and continue to in your day-to-day life. So I feel like this piece is extra insightful because of that. It's just the unfortunate reality that if you're a freshman in high school writing this piece, I don't know if too many people would care, but you throw in the accomplishments you have and people start to care more. Let's start with this. What was the impetus behind this piece, and why do you feel like it matched up so well with it being the final edition of The Rundown?
Right. So when I think about habits, I think a lot of people tend to fixate on the big decisions in their life that really move the needle, both on the positive and the negative end of the spectrum. If you look at the negative end of the spectrum specifically, I think that most people think that there's going to be one catastrophic decision that ruins their life. And when I started to think about it, I'm like, no, it's not really the one catastrophic decision. It's really the drift away from optimal that happens slowly and imperceptibly that really gets people off course. It's not the catastrophic habits that ruin you. It's the routines that you forget to even question that I think knock you off course. The things that become so accepted and such the default in your life that ultimately you're creating a gap between where you want to be and where you hope you'll end up. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily reassess the course that they're on until they've gotten very far off course. There's a nice metaphor in aviation. It's called the 1 in 60 rule. So for every 1 degree error that takes place when a plane that when a plane takes off, it's going to miss its target by 1 mile for every 60 miles flown. So the point here is like small deviations don't really matter in the short term, but they get magnified with time. And I write that the chains of bad habits are too weak to be felt until they're too strong to be broken. So my big thing was question your routines, question the negative things that drag you down, and then also think about what positive things can I install in my life to crowd out the negative space and to really ensure that I'm moving in the right direction. Because there's so many things that you just don't even consider that might be having a detrimental impact on your life, your mentality, your fitness, your health, your sleep, so on and so forth.
Alex, you know me, I'm a generous man, I'm a kind man, but I'm not going to give away substance that's free 2 clicks away. So if you're the listener and you thought you're about to find all 8 elite habits from Alex, you were wrong. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to click on the link and read it for yourself and then decide whether you want to subscribe or not. So I'm trying to come up with, just on the spot, nothing written down. But as you were thinking there, I was like, oh, what's an insightful question I can ask off of this? If you want to sit and think, or you're the smartest guy I know, so knowing you'll just have it off the top of your head. You mentioned this kind of 1 degree, difference in aviation, this example. So putting you on the spot here, what's an example from your coaching history, your athletic history? What's an example of a negative habit that you feel like runners do that shifts them away 1 degree, not noticeable in the immediate day, but over time it is noticeable? And what's a positive habit that isn't immediately noticeable in the short term, but is in the long term?
Yeah. So I think when you consider the negative things, they don't scream in protest when you do them wrong just once. It's the accumulation and the compounding effect in the negative direction that really knocks you off course. I think the most insidious one might be sleep, because we never really we never really think about like the negative. We always think that we can be heroes and we can get away with a night of bad sleep, but it's really the second or the third night or like multiple weeks strung together that that's really when it starts to have an impact on you. And when I think about habits, I think about, okay, what's the optimal state for me to perform today, both in terms of what I want to do cognitively and physically, and then you think about what are the upstream factors that lead to that. Good sleep is kind of like the furthest upstream factor that you can imagine. All good things flow from good sleep, in my opinion. And so when that starts to deteriorate, you become, your reaction time decreases, your injury rate goes up, your cognitive performance starts to drop off a cliff. But again, it's not something you notice right away. It's something that only becomes obvious when when it has the cumulative impact. So that's one thing that I would just say everyone should consider. If you want to, I'm going to have to write another newsletter about sleep specifically, but we wrote a piece on the hierarchy of recovery needs that was published last year. And at the base of that pyramid, so the most foundational, fundamental part of recovery is always sleep, in my opinion, closely followed by nutrition. And then there's other layers of the pyramid you can look at. In terms of good decisions, I'm going to sound like a broken record because it's come up on the podcast so many times, but having a good relationship with fueling, I think, is so important. It's another thing that, again, is not obvious in the short term. But career longevity, in my opinion, is defined by people who treat their bodies well. And one of the things that matters more than anything else is fueling. A good example is that a few days of a caloric deficit are not really going to change your performance noticeably. I mean, when you start to get to a week, 2 weeks, maybe, especially if the caloric deficits are noticeable. But over time, what starts to happen with the body is your body is triaging resources away so that your essential organs get paid first and the non-essential organs kind of become neglected. And your tendons and bones are the first thing to become neglected because they're not really essential to your survival. Your heart and your lungs are, and your brain is. And so again, that's just another thing where if you look at where it can go wrong and you invert it, so bad nutrition causes injuries, it causes problems. Good nutrition, very deliberate, intentional nutritional strategies and fueling strategies can make an enormous difference when you consider that over the long run.
Number 6 on this list, I don't think you would think I'd bring it up, but I do have a provoking question off of it. Number 6 is avoid large meals right before bedtime. And you kind of tie it in relation to sleep. And, I think what you're getting at is sleep quality, the studies of not eating, too much right before bed. My question I posed to you, a lot of younger athletes, collegiate athletes have practice late afternoon, maybe, gym after that, whatever their training schedule might look like. By the time they eat dinner, it's already 6:30, 7, whatever that might look like. And then they have homework or they're hanging with friends, or they just have an insanely high training load, and to get the maximum amount of calories, they have to have something before bed. What's your thought on that and maybe this is just a personally charged question. I feel like I have to eat a lot these days for the amount of work I'm putting out. And so for me, even in terms of like large meals, I find it hard to eat a ton at once. So I feel like I have maybe more meals throughout the day. And I also feel like my stomach is more receptive, hungrier in the evening. So I'm more susceptible to eating later. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule all the time, but what would your pushback or further clarification be on point six, specifically toward more the student athlete types who are going to have to eat later?
I mean, I lived it personally, for 5 to 7 years, arguably through grad school. And I think that even with juggling a crazy academic schedule and a high training load, I still think it's possible to make this decision right. And like, I think if you're not, and you're coming up with excuses, it's just poor planning, in my opinion. And I hate to be so harsh, but there are trade-offs with everything. I would just say most people don't really have a good grip on the quality of their sleep. The one place where I really found sleep tracking to be helpful for a short period of my life where I did it was understanding, what doesn't change your recovery or your sleep quality by like 1%, but are there things that change it like 5 to 10%? I wore a Whoop for a year just out of curiosity to see. And late night meals deteriorated my sleep quality more than almost anything else.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you think it has that much of an effect?
Yeah, I think it does have that much of an effect. Yeah. That, and for those who are over 21 on this podcast, alcohol just kills your sleep too. You may fall asleep faster because it's kind of a sedative, but like the quality of your sleep, the REM sleep, it's significantly worse. So yeah,
I
it's
don't
just one of
think
those
you'll
things
find
where
a bigger alcohol hater than me, so I'm all for this. I was
perfect.
actually researching this morning. Well, I just think more and more studies are coming out that are anti-alcohol. I mean, Huberman's talked about this a lot recently. I think he had a funny tweet like a few months ago. He's like, it's a bad day to be one glass of wine, because that was the kind of talking point. It's like we've gone from like drinking in moderation to now like even minimal amounts. There are more and more studies that even those can have cognitive defects. The sleep thing is massive. Chris Williamson talks about as well, like, it's not just the drink in the moment, it's how it affects your sleep. And then what does that do to the next morning, right? What does your morning routine look like? And then how does it's this trickle down effect where you think it's one night of drinking or one drink one night a week, and it will affect the next day, which affects the next day. And that's kind of this momentum. Would you say, like late night eating is comparable to like screen time before bed for you? Cause like for me, I think a lot of times if I look at screens too much without blue light glasses, which don't buy them off Amazon. I think if you buy them from a legitimate company, they're actual legit blue light glasses. I think screens can have a massive impact on my sleep. Would you say it's similar or different?
Yeah, I would say it's similar. And I actually think and what I've seen in the research is it's less about the blue light, and it might be more about the fact that you have a bottomless pit of content that you can scroll through in like this doom loop, or like you can just start doom scrolling forever. And having that at your fingertips just really is at odds with you winding down and like, shutting the brain off at night. So I do think that that's a major concern. So yeah, I do feel like that's a little bit more obvious. I did actually, if we want to reveal one of the other habits, I did actually on this list, to your point, another underrated habit in my opinion was sleep with your phone in another room. I don't know if there's been a single thing that has changed, like that may have changed my quality of life more than almost anything else. It's people resist it so much. I write in this piece that your most persistent distractions are always going to feel justified. So changing those things is arguably the hardest to do. And I've told so many people to do this. I'm like, just sleep with your phone in the bathroom, like charge it there. And you wouldn't believe the number of excuses that come up, particularly around the fact that they use their phone as an alarm. I'm like, buy an alarm off of Amazon. It's $10, but people can't do it. So I've been doing that for now, like, gosh, probably 2 years, and it's transformative. It really is transformative. So I would highly recommend trying it. Another thing, I don't know if you've heard of this, and we're gonna start. This is a little bit of a hack. more so than like a time tested strategy. But I just got a device called a brick. Have you ever heard of this? Like
I
that makes
have,
your phone into a dumb phone.
yeah.
Maybe dumb phone is not the
Do you
right
like
term to
it?
use. I love it. It's
Really?
amazing. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You'll have to check
Just
out. I worked with this like life coach type dude. It feels saying that to him feels like if someone called me an influencer, I'd probably be a little offended. He's so much more than that. But a
mhm.
great account on Instagram, one of the best follows. Die Without Regrets. I'm sure I've shared or screenshotted his work to you before, but I worked with him one-on-one for 2 months. And he created an app. I think it's called the One Thing app. And it's basically the app version of that. So like,
Okay.
yeah, it's crazy. So basically like you put in goals, different things, whatever, and your phone will like lock. Your phone will like lock everything else until like you show proof. It uses AI, like you show proof that you did the task that you said you were going to do.
Oh, I
And
love
you only
that.
get like one bailout, I think, per day, like if like it's an emergency or whatever. And
Mhm.
I just like he like gave me the beta before it came out, and I downloaded it, and it made me very aware how addicted I am to my phone, because I literally had to because you only get like one per day, like one
Yeah.
bailout. I literally had to uninstall the app to get access.
Yeah.
Because I use
It,
Instagram. The problem is Instagram's my work, and I think I need to go on Instagram. And I was like, I don't want to
right.
wait 44 minutes.
Exactly. It's just funny to me how smartphones have created this revolution in the modern world. I mean, the amount of conveniences we have access to and the amount of, quite frankly, beneficial things that we've gotten as a result of smartphones. I'm thinking like Uber, like I'm thinking, delivery to your door, like just incredible things. But also now there's this counter movement of like, let's take this device that changed our lives and let's just try to basically eliminate it, because everyone's so hooked. It's just amazing how much of a competitive advantage you can gain by focusing a little bit longer than the average person. Charlie Munger, who I quote on this podcast all the time, said like one of the biggest reasons I was successful in life was having a long attention span. And if there's anything that I know about the modern world, it's that our attention span is shrinking at like a rapid rate. So anyway, sleeping with your phone in another room, I think just pick up a book instead. Like grab a Kindle, grab a hard copy book, replace that. Like again, you're gonna feel like the distraction is justified, but just give it a shot. If I could share one more habit, and then we'll move on to the next one,
Go
just
for it.
because I think this one has really been transformative as well. I write, this is the second point, in relationships in life, always go positive and go first. We've talked about like the energy that you put in the world tends to be reflected back on you, and I think it's a fundamental principle of biology that's hardwired into our brains, that we operate through mirrored reciprocity. So you're going to receive back from others exactly what you project into the world. I read a good example the other day of someone who was elaborating on this point. He said, like, if you pick up a cat by its tail, it's not going to take long to learn that that's the wrong way to do it, because if you are disagreeable with the cat, it's going to be disagreeable with you, right? And so this is true in human relationships as well. Whereas if you pick up the cat, you like cuddle with the cat and you pet it, like it's going to love you. It's going to start purring. And anyway, I bring that example up just to say that so many people, I think, wait for support, enthusiasm, generosity, so on and so forth. But if you lead with it, you'd be amazed at how many people are going to match your energy and how much better your life is going to be. So I would say take the risk to, take that leap of faith to be the one who is generous, who is positive, and does it first, because I think the world is going to pay you back in 100 different ways.
I love that you chose this point, because I was actually gonna bring up this point next to close us out. So great minds think alike. The reason why is because in my life, not calling any names out here, but I see so frequently people in my life get frustrated that they aren't seeing people as often, or they're not hanging out with people as often, or they don't have more friends, or they don't have more quality friends. And what I always tell them is like, it's the unfortunate reality of the world, but like, it's so unlikely that you're going to be the person that you have 5 people text you every week that are like, hey, you want to hang out, or hey, you want to talk on the phone. And for me, myself, and I, like, sometimes to get someone to that point, you have to initiate. Like, to get someone to want to hang out with you or want to invest in your friendship, you a lot of times have to be the person to start that, to show that person that you're worth the reciprocation. And man, we live in this world where everyone wants people to do everything for them, but yet they're not willing to do the very things that they want other people to do. And it's just,
Exactly.
it's a shocker. So, I mean, I think for friendships, for business, for even small stuff in the sport, you have to be the one to take the first step, unless you're really damn lucky. And I think you only get a few lucky breaks. I mean, I'm sure most of your friendships or friends or it comes from, I would have been delusional in eighth grade when I emailed you if I was like, oh, this guy's just going to read, it's like I had to water the flower first.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I think a good exercise in life is look at all the traits that you admire in other people that you like, that you want, and then embody them. And I think if you embody those traits, you will start to attract similar people. It's amazing how like people with self-respect attract people with self-respect, and people who are chaotic attract people who are chaotic. Like you just see it all over the place. So this trend is hardwired into psychology and biology. And again, if you look hard enough, it's going to pop up everywhere.
Next edition we're going through today, another hot ticket item for people, seemingly the running shoe myth that won't die. Why matching shoes to foot type doesn't prevent injuries and what actually does. I texted you as soon as you said that the draft was up for this one, that I was grateful you wrote this piece because I didn't even know that there was science or findings around this subject. And the myth that you break down in this was one that I certainly grew up with, and kind of matching what shoe you bought. I had a lot of people always come to me and be like, oh, what shoe should I buy? And I would always go, well, like, do you know how you pronate? And so I always appreciated, you writing this piece, because I honestly didn't know that this existed, that the findings in here existed. I think a lot of other people didn't as well.
Well, I believed in the myth for a long time myself, so I don't think you or any other people can fault themselves for it. I start this newsletter off by describing my first real job in high school was working as a shoe salesman in a running store. It was kind of a natural fit for someone who ran, obviously. And when I came in and I was basically doing my sales training, I was taught this system where we would do an evaluation on a customer. We'd have them take their shoes off. They'd walk around barefoot. They'd lunge in a few different directions. And we would basically be fixated on their foot and ankle. And we would be looking for pronation. So basically what pronation is, for those who want to try to visualize it, is when your foot plants, it tends to roll inwards a little bit and the arch collapses. It's a totally normal movement. It's actually one way that you do dissipate some force. However, people started to believe, and the shoe industry has kind of taught us that excessive pronation is a problem that needs to be solved, or at least any pronation at all is a problem that needs to be solved. And so we really would group our sales strategy into basically into customer cohorts that were like, okay, if you pronate, you're going to look at this shoe. If you don't pronate, you're going to look at this shoe. And everyone else is going to look at, just like a high cushion trainer or something like that. Anyway, the thing that's crazy to me is that shoe technology has changed so much. We've even lived through a few different revolutions, from the born to run minimalist movement to now the pendulum swinging to the entirely other side of the spectrum with maximalist shoes to carbon plated shoes. And the one inconvenient fact still remains, which is that if you look at the prevalence of running injuries over the past 40 years, they have barely budged. Like they're just as high as they ever were. And it seems kind of like something isn't adding up here, right? Like if shoe technology has supposedly gotten so much better, maybe it has gotten better for performance. Maybe we're running faster, but the promise of a shoe fixing injuries just has not delivered time and time again. So that was the premise of writing this piece. And I kind of broke down several of the claims that the shoe industry is promising us and like where the data just doesn't support it.
If anything, and I know you work for Nike, so I'll be positive about Nike right now. And I would say this unbiased. If anything, don't you think that companies like Nike have shifted their focus from making stability shoes to, gosh, what's the shoe with the massive bubble beneath it? The Nike.
Oh, I think it's the Vomero Premium.
Yeah, the Vomero Premium. That, to my understanding, that's not a stability shoe. But I talked to Connor Mans a ton about it. Nike wanted me to talk to him on the podcast about how he kind of pioneered a lot of the technology behind that shoe. He trained with it leading into the Olympic trials, coming back from injury. And it's like, I feel like shoe companies are more putting their focus into the technologies of shoes and like how they can add stack height and specific foams or plates or whatever to keep people healthy, rather than like fixating on how someone, because the reality is everyone has different pronation, I assume, to an extent.
Right. Agree with you. The one place I would challenge that is even if we look at, high cushioning shoes, what's the implicit assumption or the promise behind that claim? It's that we're going to reduce the amount of force that you're putting on your limbs, your joints, all that stuff, right? Like people are so concerned getting into running about their knees giving out. And they're like, we want cushioning to try to like lessen the impact forces of running. And it's actually really interesting because if you look at biomechanical studies, it actually there's studies that have looked at foam, like thick, soft foam and like minimalist shoes. And what actually happens is something called impact moderation. So when you have a high cushion trainer, you actually subconsciously adjust the stiffness of your leg depending on the shoe that you're wearing, so that when you increase that cushioning, you're actually not only stiffening your leg, which then like changes the biomechanics of your lower limb, which can actually which can increase the impact forces that you feel on the ground. So it's almost like the exact opposite effect of what you want. Before I'm like trying, I don't mean to like dismantle the entire running shoe industry. That's not at all the point of this piece. It basically just goes to show that like some of the promises just really don't hold water. And there's a much better filter for shoe selection that we can talk about, which I think is way simpler and way easier, but overlooked because we like to just complicate things.
Yeah, before we get into that, I was flown out to the running event with Brooks running event. For people who aren't familiar, it's kind of the world's biggest running trade show. So I saw all the Nike lineup that they unveiled this year, like last November. It's kind of under wraps. If you're there, you don't talk about the shoes that are being released, but everyone kind of unveils their shoes and technology. So I was there with Brooks. They're coming out with a shoe. I believe it comes out end of this month, called the Brooks Glycerin Flex. And if you haven't listened to this episode, I actually highly recommend you listen to it, because I had the kind of designer on it on the podcast, Nikhil Jain. He's been with Brooks forever. And they basically said there are these two camps. There's the maximalists and then the minimalists. And he's like, we went years ago from being like kind of in the minimalist category to then extreme shift to the maximalist category. Both camps are injured. Both camps aren't like the biggest fan. And so they pioneered this subject. Oh, what is the name of it? Maybe essentialism, basically, where you take the best components of both. And I think they've come up with findings or studies. I don't know how accurate, or if they, reverse engineered it to make their shoe look better. I don't know. Companies do things like that. But at least my experience using this shoe, the shoe basically like flexes to your foot while also having cushion. So it like takes the best of both worlds. My takeaway from that is it's crazy. That trip, it's crazy how much every single running shoe brand is truly like a science lab in trying to like reverse engineer injuries and what works and what doesn't. And what I like at least about this kind of Brooks strategy is, as with most things in life, Alex, it's never the extremes where the answer is found. It's generally somewhere in the middle.
That's right. I think the problem that we're kind of talking about is single factor prescription keeps failing. We assume that the body is like a passive structure that's waiting to be corrected by foam and geometry. And the reality is it doesn't really work quite that way, because by changing the geometry of the shoe, it doesn't just reduce overall load, it actually just redistributes it. So there's trade-offs with all of these things in life, right? And especially with running shoes. So I'm gonna read a section of the newsletter. It says, I say a motion control shoe might limit tibial rotation, but it can increase knee stress. A zero drop shoe might reduce knee load, but it can put more strain on the Achilles tendon. A highly cushioned shoe may soften the impact of landing while prompting stiffer leg mechanics that actually raise loading rates elsewhere. So many of the tweaks that they're making to the shoes are actually just moving the problem from one structure to the other. And because the shoe industry hasn't figured out how to defy the laws of physics, like that's going to be an eternal struggle. So I completely agree with you. Moving towards solutions. So if we want to get actionable, we've identified the problem. If people want some actionable takeaways here, there's really two things that I talk about that I think
real
are
quick.
important.
Can I pause you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Super fast. To your knowledge, are running shoe stores still going through the same method that you yourself were taught years ago?
That is a great question. I have not stepped in a running shoe store in a long time.
Okay.
I mean, I know
the pros of being a college athlete and getting free shoes.
Yeah, no, exactly. I know that
the only reason
Nike...
I asked is because when you wrote this, I was like, wow, like this is the one piece you've ever come to me with that I've been like, wow, I didn't know that was true.
Yeah. I know that I can really only speak to Nike because I have some insight into their brand marketing and brand marketing strategy. they have consolidated their shoes into three primary verticals, like the Pegasus with a low, medium, and high tier, the Vomero, and then the Structure. And so I think, again, there used to be like a shoe that was going to solve a specific problem. And I think Nike was like, well, this isn't working. We're just going to try to consolidate into our three most successful shoes. And then we're going to give slightly different versions depending on what the customer wants. And I think the biggest difference is they're not promising a reduction in injury necessarily. They're changing the feel of the shoe. And I think that really matters a lot. Which takes me to one of my points, which is that comfort really is the factor that matters more than anything else. When you put a shoe on your foot, you should ask yourself, how does this actually feel? I think that comfort is integrating all the variables that actually matter. When a shoe feels right on your foot and you're like, this actually feels good, it's probably allowing you to move in a way that aligns with your natural patterns rather than resisting it. And there actually have been studies. There's a study done in 2025, which you can read about in the newsletter, that found that people who wore shoes that were more comfortable to them did have lower injury rates over 6 months. It was one study. I'm not going to hang like all of my claims on one scientific study, but I think it points to something that potentially has some validity. And secondly, the other thing that seems to work is rotating shoe types. Now, I would not go from a maximalist to a minimalist shoe overnight. That's a very abrupt and dramatic transition, which actually really tends to cause problems. Or in reverse, actually, I probably wouldn't go minimalist to maximalist either. But if you have shoes that are generally the same in terms of structure and geometry, but there's some subtle differences, I think that's tremendously beneficial. Reason being, a lot of runners face the problem of chronic repetitive stress, right? We run tens of thousands of steps per week where we're loading the structures of our leg in the same way. And again, runners don't have like acute ACL ruptures. What we have are like, tendinitis and bone injuries and like inflammation from repetitive overuse injuries. And so if you can actually subtly change the biomechanics of your foot strike and your push off through a different shoe, I actually think those slight perturbations in movement patterns could load the tissues differently and redistribute the stress across the leg more so than concentrating it on one spot, and this has been tested as well. I'm not just making this up. Like, I think that has some potential for being effective. If there's any PTs or biomechanists out there listening, please let me know if you disagree with that statement. But in my experience and having talked to some experts, it seems like people generally agree on this approach.
I've also found it interesting. I've never known the industry to make like stability super shoes. It's always just been like the super shoes across the board. And I always find it interesting how it's like we're assuming that there's this person that fits into one category, but then the second that they get into performance shoes, it's just like every other shoe. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, I don't know either. I mean, I think variety helps a lot, right? Like, if you go in the weight room, any strength and conditioning coach that's working with a track and field team will try to take a distance runner and be like, we want you to move in different directions. Why? Because loading the bones in different directions is really beneficial. We runners tend to, we just move in one direction almost all the time. It's either straight or turning left. And there's now kind of, I think, been a little bit of an appreciation for, okay, well, can we change the surface? Can we change the direction on the track? A lot of people these days are running opposite direction on the track, right? Because we've maybe begun to appreciate that just hammering left-hand turns all the time for people running high mileage isn't great. I think the same thing goes for shoes. Like you should rotate between, you should have a lot of arrows in your quiver, and shoes are kind of like that. And again, if you don't have the budget to buy multiple shoes and you're not a professional runner, which is most of this audience, even just rotating between maybe a training shoe and a workout shoe could be a great starting point. So I think that's probably realistic for a lot of people in this audience.
The money question, last question for a runner listening. What is the perspective from a professional running coach? How does someone find their dream shoe, their dream fit?
I think you want to sample a lot. And I would say sample not just by trying it on and standing up or walking around, to whatever extent that you can actually run in the shoe. And so, I have the athletes that I coach now, they're fortunate to get an unlimited Nike shoes whenever they want. all of them are rotating between different shoes on different days. They're working out in a certain type of shoe. They're doing their doubles in a different kind of shoe. They're doing their normal easy runs in a different kind of shoe. So I think variety is really important. But the way you're going to find the shoe that feels best on your foot is sampling a lot of shoes and then actually testing them the way that you test them on the roads, which is running and not just standing up in them.
Would you also say rotating shoes almost helps with like, I don't know the word for it, limb strength, or just flexibility, like almost making your body not too used to the one same feeling all the time?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I was trying to explain with how switching the shoe type can kind of, in very subtle ways, change your biomechanics. Those kind of the perturbations in movement that happen, I think, are really beneficial because you get caught in these grooves of movement patterns, and I think disrupting that every once in a while is probably healthy for the body.
And then what was my last question? I had one more question for you off of this before moving on. Shoe types. Oh, when I was growing up, we had this myth of like you have to break in a shoe. Do you
Oh
think
yeah.
that's true? And if so, how does that clash up on like trying shoes in a store where a shoe might feel really good when you first put it on, but might feel wildly different 25 miles in?
I'll be honest with you, that's a great question that I don't have an answer for. I really don't know. If anyone has any perspectives in the audience, let us know.
What
Yeah,
I feel like I feel like shoes over time, at least from my perspective, almost come more out of the box ready.
Mhm.
But that also could be that I bought cheaper running shoes back in the day, and technology has come a long way.
Right.
I'll say this: I've had 4 or 5 pairs of Alpha Flies. Sorry, I maybe don't want to admit that, but I get sent a lot of Alpha Flies. Every marathon, you want a new pair of Alpha Flies. And they always feel like my first workout in them because
Mhm.
it's a good. I know you'd approve of this. You should try out the shoes you're going to race in. You shouldn't just
Yeah.
open a new pair. The first workout in a pair of Alpha Flies, they always feel ready to fly.
Mhm.
I don't feel like that was the case years ago with other pairs of shoes. So I'll at least go on record and state that I feel like 5-10 years ago you had to break in shoes more. But also different shoes. Again, it's super nuanced. Like a couple years ago, a shoe felt really dead at 200 miles, and now these massive high stack shoes are like good through 450, 500 miles. So I feel like the
Yeah.
rules are changing in front of us.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I also don't know. I'm going to go on a limb here and say I haven't researched this, but there's, I do wonder if kind of like you have to swap out your shoes at a certain number of miles is a convenience story that's concocted by the shoe industry to get them to sell more shoes. I don't know. um, but it's really hard to define when is a shoe ready to be swapped out. I mean, if the tread is like fraying beneath the shoe, probably swap it out. Um, the rule of thumb generally that I've used is like probably around 500 miles. But now that I am talking about this in real time, I probably should research that because I don't know if,
I think it's
what
less. I think it's like
you think
300
is
to
less. Yeah.
400, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
also think that if you're a serious athlete, why risk 50 more miles in a shoe unless you're like
Yeah.
really pinching pennies? I
Hmm.
know a lot of people who have gotten injured from just not buying new pairs of shoes and letting their pride get in the way of being able to text their group chat that they ran X amount of miles in whatever specific shoe. So it's like, if
Hmm.
you're really serious about your running, is that a gamble you want to take? I think the best thing I've seen people do, again, I'm the worst metric of all time, 10 feet over is 100 pairs of shoes, many of which are not used. It's not the best situation. Is like people will buy a new pair of shoe when a pair is at like 300 or so miles, and then they'll slowly start to like rotate between as the older pair of shoe is like getting less and less miles. So like not throwing it out all at once and then fully shifting over, but like can kind of doing the 2-for-1 method. I think if
Yeah.
you have money as well, the best thing you can do is have 2 pairs of shoes at once for regular easy runs, because they've done studies on this. The foam, if you allow like 1 to 2 days between runs, the foam, I don't know the correct word, but it doesn't compress as much.
Decompresses.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So you can actually add more miles. I don't know the calculation of money and if you're actually getting your money's worth through the extra miles that you're gaining, but I find even from an injury perspective that was always helpful back in the day, just to switch up shoes and all that. Gosh, I feel like we're shoe designers at this point with all the shoe talk.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. No, but I'd say the take home message here is, don't worry about picking a shoe that's going to fit your foot type exactly. Pick a shoe that feels good when you wear it and run in it. And then if you have the budget that allows for it, switching between a few different shoe types, not dramatic changes, not like maximalist to minimalist, but a few different shoe types that are roughly the same in terms of their dimensions and whatnot could be helpful.
Other thing for you before we fully move on, that the shoe gods are just pounding the subject today. I went to Under Armour and got tested on a bunch of their like different, oh gosh, they have all these fancy tools at these headquarters. And they were telling me most people have different shoe size. Most people's feet aren't the exact same size. Did you know this?
I did know that, actually. I learned
Yeah,
that
it's
when I was working in the
fascinating.
shoe store. Yeah.
They said it's not significant enough to normally merit having two different shoe sizes, but I think if you specifically keep getting injured on one side of your body, it could be multiple things, but maybe something to potentially look into. It's not too hard to figure out if one foot is longer or bigger than the other.
If you want one other interesting fact that I learned lately about shoes, we haven't even talked about this, and this might have to be another newsletter, but the performance advantage that comes from shoes mostly is coming through running economy. So the efficiency of movement with a carbon plated shoe with, a kind of a specialty foam is really the advantage you're getting. It actually turns out that you don't get uniform advantages from all super shoes. So for instance, there are some people that might see a disproportionate benefit from wearing an Alpha Fly compared to a Vaporfly compared to a Streak Fly. And so if you really wanted to do this like soup to nuts and figure out what is the absolute best shoe for me from a performance perspective, you probably could do metabolic testing and figure out, okay, what am I most economical in the variety of super shoes that exist? But that's for a very small subset of our audience.
I was gonna say, we were talking a second ago if you can afford a second pair of shoes. Now we're talking about metabolic testing to see how you. So there are levels to the game, as you would say.
There are levels to the game.
Last addition to run through here. Gold medal doesn't fix you. Do I have that right or no?
That's right.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I was so deep in the shoe talk in my head. It's been a long day. The traps of ambition and the tools to escape them. Take me through this piece. I really enjoyed this one. I think we all have this sort of let's not even say gold medal, but we think that if we achieve our goals, they'll fix us.
Exactly. This was a follow-up piece to something that we talked about and wrote called When Winning Stops Feeling Good. And I really broke down like the science of dopamine and how we get hooked to the chase. And the feeling of accomplishment is always pretty emotionally flat because the biology of our brain is always designed to seek more rather than to savor enough. And this is a problem that I see manifest in elite athletes all the time because they convince themselves that if they work hard enough today and they sacrifice enough things, when they finally arrive at that goal, it's going to fix all of their problems and they're going to be blissfully happy forever. And that just doesn't happen. A few things that you should consider. This quote has been thrown around a few times on our podcast together, but you've already achieved a lot of the things that you said would make you happy. And if you look back at some of your major accomplishments, you kind of begin to recognize that beyond that first big win that we talked about, everything else after that kind of feels like a bit of an afterthought. Like it's hard to recreate the emotions and the conditions of that first big win. And so it's only logical to assume that, every win that you'll feel in the future as well is probably not going to completely change or reorient your life the way you expect it to. There's this concept in psychology, which closely relates to what we're talking about, called the hedonic treadmill, which is that we're very, very quick to adapt to the circumstances of our life and then return to a baseline level of happiness. There's actually a study, which I may not get all the details totally correct, but they looked at happiness levels of people who either won the lottery or were involved in a major accident and became paralyzed. And they tracked their happiness levels over the course of, I believe, 6 to 12 months. And what they found is that the people who suffered the tragic accident, their happiness levels tanked right away and then slowly began to climb again as they adjusted to that new life. And the people who won the lottery were like euphoric for a few days. And then as you like expand the timeline, they start to converge back to almost exactly where they were in the beginning 6 to 12 months later. So it just goes to show that, the human mind doesn't always appreciate the distance that you've covered, it always fixates on the need for more. And your ambition is always going to outpace your satisfaction. So assuming that you're going to get a permanent bump in your happiness or your level of being content in the world from a win or an accomplishment is not really a promise that holds true.
One of my favorite sections of this was reframing the chase. And I think it's the start of a broader response from you in regards to like, how do we shift our perspective on this issue, knowing that we fall into it. And the example you gave is a crazy one. Like I would ask you, okay, well then what ultimately does provide, satisfaction, and how do you enjoy the chase?
I think we assume that the win or the accomplishment is, like I said, is going to fundamentally change our lives. But we forget, again, this goes back to like a cliche saying, which is like, it's the process over the outcome, right? Like pursuing your goals constitutes 99% of your life. If you think about the number of times that you race compared to the amount of days and hours that you log training, like the medal ceremony in the race is a fleeting moment. It's like a fraction of the total time that you're spending on this pursuit. So if you deprive yourself of joy, of spontaneity and connection, and you put that all on hold and you're like, I need to suffer today for a better tomorrow, you run the risk of spending your entire life in a state of self-imposed waiting. And there's a great quote from a philosopher that said, there's no Zen on the tops of mountains. The only Zen that you experience at the tops of mountains is what you bring up there. So you have to recognize that your relationship with the daily work is what is going to define you far more than, how the accomplishment is going to change you, because how you spend your hours is how you spend your days, and how you spend your days is ultimately what makes up your life.
What would you say is the biggest reframe with all this in mind that an athlete listening today can make right now consciously?
I think the biggest thing is probably separating your identity from your accomplishments. I think really good athletes become pretty myopic and tunnel vision, where the sport is the only thing that matters to them. And there's a great quote from a Norwegian cross-country skier who I idolized growing up, who said, "A gold medalist is something I have been and is something that I can be again. It is not something that I am." So he kind of separates himself and his identity from the accomplishment itself. Because when you're praised and you're rewarded for things, it's only natural to assume that, that is going to become your entire life. But the reality is you're kind of creating a pretty fragile existence psychologically, because the moment that starts to slip, or the moment that identity, where something goes wrong, your constructed sense of identity starts to shatter. And so I would think about, again, identity is who you become through the pursuit, not solely what you accomplish. That's really a big reframe. The other thing that I would ask yourself is, are you doing this for yourself? Or are you doing this to win the approval of others? I think so much of what drives this arrival fallacy is external validation. You're chasing these accomplishments because you kind of finally want to seek approval from others. But I find that if you make your whole life about if you create your entire existence and you design your whole life around making other people happy, you're probably going to lose the approval of yourself. And so a great revealing question to ask yourself is, would this still matter to me even if nobody knew about it? Could I move to the woods, with no, outside touch with the human world, do this thing, and would it still be intrinsically rewarding to me? If the answer is yes, keep going. If you really start to question your motives when you ask yourself that, maybe it's time to reorient or kind of retool the process a little bit.
Yeah, you'd be shocked how many people it's crazy, like do their run or their workout so that their Strava following knows they did it, and so that they will that they won't be judged for a day missed or a workout missed. Or how many people push when they don't feel good because they're too embarrassed to share with their Strava that they didn't do the workout. Or would the people cold plunging warriors still cold plunge if they couldn't post it on their Instagram story? And I honestly wonder what that would look like. One of my favorite quotes that you share in here is from Adam Grant, who said, "Success is most satisfying when you have high aspirations, but moderate or modest expectations. You can set ambitious goals without taking for granted that you'll achieve them."
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, you can define happiness as the gap between your expectations and reality. And people who constantly want more from the world and demand more from the world are probably going to be the people who feel like they're coming up short constantly and they're just not achieving what they want to achieve. And so really like a life hack is to have relatively low expectations because you're continually going to be pleasantly surprised by good things that happen rather than being let down when things don't go the way you want them to go. So it's harder to I'll admit with a lot of these things, it's a lot harder to actually embody and embrace these things than it is to talk about them. I mean, this has been a perennial struggle for me, right? Like I thought that becoming the NCAA All-American would fundamentally change my life. And it's like you wake up the next morning and you're just like, that's great. Like another day, you know?
Or what's next?
Yeah.
How
What's next? This? Exactly. It's, and even at the highest levels in the sport, you even think that like an Olympic medalist and I've been around a few of them over the past couple of years, like external accomplishments aren't solving their internal problems. They're still showing up in life as the same person that they were. Yeah, they're getting a lot more praise and attention. But like, it's not fixing their insecurities. It's not fixing the things that torment them. Those things are going to persist no matter if you win or not. So I would say stop putting so much stock in, the medal or the win changing you because it probably isn't. It's not going to, you're still going to be the same person. So do the thing because you find it intrinsically rewarding and because it makes you a better person and it changes your identity for the better for having done the work.
You mentioned the really good and insightful quote from the Norwegian, I think skier you had said, in regards to like the identity piece off of that. So maybe a hot ticket question for you, because I know you know many people who have these. What's your take on those who get the Olympic tattoos right after becoming an Olympian, or the people who their bio is like it's just Olympian? I see that all the time. When we do these insane feats that no one else in our circle has really done, it can be very. Now, by the way, if I was an Olympian, who am I to say I wouldn't get the tattoo? I don't know. But it seems like that's a direct reflection off of that quote. It's we want this forever stamp that we are this thing.
That's a great point. I don't even know if I'm really qualified to talk about this because I've always said like if I became an Olympian, I would get. That's the only time I would get a tattoo in life.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. I mean, that's what I used to say. So maybe I do want that, just like that durable evidence. I think we should be careful not to like. You can and should be proud of your accomplishments, right? Like people who become Olympians by definition had to outwork pretty much everybody in the entire world. And that takes an enormous amount of sacrifice, an enormous amount of discipline. And so, we shouldn't brush that off as nothing. But, just be careful about, I'll just say what I've said 100 times in this podcast. Be careful about thinking that that's going to change you forever. You can have a tattoo on your body, but like, it's not going to fix all your problems.
What's the final Spark Notes takeaway message from this edition?
I'll close with a quote, which is, to cross an ocean, you must love the ocean before you love the far shore. So many times I feel like we're striving for the next horizon. And when we get to that horizon, it resets, right? Like the goalpost has moved again. And so the reminder here for the audience is that arrival is not where life happens. Life happens in the long stretch between those horizons. And that could be in the miles that you run, in the monotony that you endure, but most importantly, in the meaning that you create along the way.
There were 2 other additions that we didn't recap in this newsletter, 25 lessons that hit harder than any workout, published on December 18th. And then on Christmas Day, the 2025 rundown recap, 10 lessons to train smarter, stay healthy, and go faster. Highly recommend reading both those editions. You and I kind of both agreed that we had covered a lot of that substance in the last podcast we had done with each other, which was sort of a 2025 year in review and also looking ahead to 2026. But is there any specific point before I close out this episode for good from either of those editions that you want to talk about or bring to light?
Just in 30 seconds, I'll give you the premise. I love, if it's not already obvious, learning and exposing myself to new ideas. So the one that came out it was like the 25 best ideas that I found in this calendar year. This was for 2025. I tried to pull from articles, podcasts, and books that really changed my perspective, that forced me to think, and that in very roundabout ways may not on the surface level seem to relate to running, but really are about mastery. They're about performance. They're about all the things that, create the lifestyle that's required for success. So if you want inspiration on things to read, books to read, podcasts to listen to, that's a great place to go. And then the 2025 rundown recap is, if you're new to the podcast here, or if you're new to the newsletter, that's probably the most succinct way that you can understand, I guess, my philosophy and approach to the sport. And it takes what I thought were the 10 best ideas and consolidates them into one newsletter. So if you want the most wisdom packed, highest density of good ideas in a piece of writing, I would go there.
Alex, as always, appreciate the insights, breaking down all these editions, writing them in the first place. I think you and I can both say we had a amazing end of the year. I think December was definitely our most successful month to date. It feels like a lot of exciting momentum within this community. As always, if you're listening, if you have a thought or an idea or something you want us to talk about or Alex to write on, you can always email me, therunningeffect@gmail.com, DM me, or even leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, and I'll be sure to get to it. Alex, appreciate it as always, and I will talk to you 4 editions down the road. If you're a listener, go subscribe to the I was going to say podcast. I guess there's a chance someone listening might not be subscribed to the podcast, but before you do that, scroll in the show notes, subscribe to the newsletter, where you can not have Alex once a month, but every single Thursday in your inbox for free.
Thank you. Until next time.